Hello students, in the last video we learnt about reflex actions and conditions when they are generated. The natural question is, how is control and coordination achieved in such situations? Let's see this today. Students, consider a case when we touch a hot object. It is dangerous or an urgent situation for us. How will we respond to this? One way is to think about pain and getting burnt and then move our hand back. An important question then is, how long will it take us to think all this? The answer depends on how we think. As we know, thinking is a complex process, as it involves a complicated interaction of many nerve impulses from many neurons. If this is the case, we may end up burning our hands. How does the design of the body solve this problem? The second way is to take up a simple way. That is, the nerves that detect heat are connected to the nerves that move muscles in a simpler way, and this would be fastest way to respond. Such a connection is commonly called a reflex arc. From the site of origin, the electrical impulses or signals follow specific route to the spinal cord and back to the effector organ. This pathway is known as the reflex arc. Reflex arc includes 5 functional components: receptors, sensory neurons, integrating center, motor neuron, and effector. In this arc, the sensory neuron, the dendrites, serve as receptors. Changes in the internal or external environment trigger an action potential or nerve impulse in these dendrites. The nerve impulse is then carried by the sensory neurons all the way to the spinal cord. The impulse is propagated from sensory neuron to the motor neuron in the integration center of the spinal cord. Thus, the sensory neuron is connected either directly to motor neurons or indirectly by interneurons. The motor neurons take the nerve impulses to the muscles of glands in the body. The part of the body that responds to the motor nerve impulses is called the effector. Thus, this complete pathway from the receptor organ to the effector organ by integration center in spinal cord is called the reflex arc. Now let's see our previous example. What will happen if you touch hot object? Here, the heat sensitive neurons in the skin act as the receptors and generate electrical signals. Sensory neurons carry signals from skin to the spinal cord. The synapses in the gray matter of spinal cord are the integration center. They will analyze and integrate these signals. Integrated signals from spinal cord comes to motor neuron and then goes to muscles of hand via motor nerves. Muscles of hand contract in response and thus they are called as effector organs. As in this case, the skeletal muscles are the effectors, and this type of reflex action is called as somatic reflex. If the effector is smooth or cardiac muscle, then the reflexes are called the visceral reflex, as smooth muscles or muscles of organs like kidney are called visceral muscles. Let's have a look at some other common reflex action controlled by spinal cord. A general tap below the kneecap makes the leg jerk. This is called a stretch reflex or patellar reflex. You will ask why it is called so. Because the bone which senses this stimuli of tap are kneecap bone called patella bone, and muscles which respond, they get stretched out when leg moves back, so it is called a stretch reflex. When you touch a hot pan, your hands is withdrawn instantly. This is an example of withdrawal reflex. If you rub the sole of the lateral sides of your foot with a blunt instrument, the toes curved down and inwards, and this is known as plantar reflex. For the same stimuli, babies respond differently. Their toes curved up and fan outwards, called as Babinski reflex. You know students, this Babinski reflex is also one clinical symptom if it is observed in adults, because Babinski reflex goes away after 1 year. If a Babinski reflex is present, it shows that the upper motor neuron pathway has been injured. Did you notice students that in all the reflex actions discussed here, brain is not involved. Thus, spinal reflexes, that is reflex actions controlled by spinal cord, do not involve brain. But there are some reflexes which are controlled by brain also. They are called as cerebral reflexes. We have some examples of cerebral reflexes in our previous video. Let us recall them. They are swallowing, blinking of eyes, vomiting, tracking movement of eyes while reading, etc. So students, we have seen that reflex actions are mostly controlled by spinal cord. It does not involve brain. They are called as spinal reflex. The whole path is called as reflex arc. Reflex arc starts from sensory receptors, where stimuli are received. From here, signals are taken via sensory nerve to spinal cord. They are analyzed here and passed to motor neuron. They reach muscles or glands called effectors via motor neurons, and the muscle movements is generated. In the next video, we see how this spinal cord along the brain and nerves make whole human nervous system and its types.